Hello and welcome to the Being Becoming podcast. My name is Logan Hauer. I'm going to try and do something a little bit different today. I am going to attempt a solo podcast episode. This season we've featured guests, discussed a book, and plan to hopefully do more of that in the future. And I normally am joined by my regular co-hosts, Austin and Patrick, who are also two very good friends of mine. But given this time of year, just with the holidays and busyness and etc., I just thought, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I'll be able to process something, thinking extemporaneously that might be helpful to somebody out there listening, or maybe helpful to myself. I don't have anything written down, so we'll see how this goes. So we're in December now, beginning of December. November was kind of a rough month. As I had stated on our last episode, which would have come out around the middle of November, I was talking with Patrick and Austin about a surgery that I had gone through in November. I've been recovering from that and just want to be 100%, but trying to be patient and heal and rest, but then also push myself when I can. Physical therapy has been really helpful for that for me. Trying to do stuff just on my own while I'm at home. Also trying to ice and elevate as much as I can. But I last night had watched the David Holmes documentary, was humbled sufficiently about his very serious life-altering injury, and it helped put into perspective an ACL tear. I would take that any day over a serious spinal injury, so it helped me have perspective, and I'd highly recommend checking out the documentary. It's called The Boy Who Lived. He is somehow able to maintain a great outlook on life despite having gone through all of these complications that resulted from an injury that he occurred in which he broke his neck. So I'd recommend anyone to check that out. It's pretty moving, especially if you're a fan of the Harry Potter movies at all, just to see some of the behind the scenes stunt work and whatnot that was going on in the film. And for anyone curious, it is about the stuntman that played or did the stunts rather for Daniel Radcliffe in the Harry Potter films. He, by all accounts seems like a great person, and unfortunately just went through a horrible injury. So check that out if you want. That's kind of been on my mind a lot today, in a good way, because I was moved very much by his character. And I say character in meaning his strength and resolve, his personhood or whatnot, not in that he's playing a quote-unquote character as an actor or something. Nevertheless, I'm getting into the weeds now. Yeah, so Spotify Wrapped has come out, or if you use Apple Music or something else, they probably have a similar comparable to that. Basically a recount of the year. I wish I could take more diligent notes and keep track of that better in my personal life of, what did 2023 wrapped, quote unquote, look like for me as far as maybe achievements or milestones, things of that nature. Ever since I've graduated college, it feels as if time's just going by very quickly, and I have this urge to keep track of it for some reason, or to try to make it more meaningful by recounting things that have occurred. Maybe that's normal, maybe that's not. Be for the listener to decide. But it's fun to look at the different, statistics and artists that you listen to. Austin and I were going over our list on a phone call we had, I think this past week or the week before, but maybe, no one probably cares enough for me to get into the specifics of my artists that I listen to, but I thought that's a really cool tool that they offer, and seeing the amount of time you spend on it might be a little scary or daunting or a wake-up call, but nevertheless helpful, a good tool. And speaking of Spotify, and speaking of this podcast, I think I was overall pretty happy with the way this podcast has been doing this year, and obviously we're more so doing this to get our thoughts out there and try to have good, productive conversations about what we believe to be important topics. But it's nice to see some kind of support or viewership, whatever you want to call it, people tuning in and listening. So we were the number one podcast for 5 people in our first year, which is pretty cool. Thank you all for listening and whatnot. But yeah, that was kind of cool. And there's some other statistics and stuff I don't really remember about how many hours people listen to, or, we were in the top 5 for however many people, and what I just remember we were the number one podcast for 5 people, and that's all I really remember, because I'm just going off the top of my head right now. Don't really have anything planned, but thought that was pretty interesting. Speaking of the year-end review or the Wrapped or whatnot that Spotify does, it would be interesting if they did something like that for books. I bet I use the Amazon app for keeping track of the books that I read. I wonder if they do have something like that. I know you can set goals on what you read and kind of keep track of it through the year. But I know I've done very poorly at reading this year, and that's definitely a 2024 goal I have in mind, and maybe some of you listening out there can relate with me a little bit in that sense of wanting to read more. Part of our hope of doing this podcast was to read more and discuss those books with each other. So it's kind of funny, this year ended up not doing that, which is interesting. Might have to do some thinking on why that was the case. I am thankful, though, however, for my sister, Aaliyah, who got me a book when I was recovering from my surgery that I've been reading. And I don't have it with me, unfortunately. I can't remember the title of it. But it's a really nice book about liturgy and seeing our daily tasks, chores, or just daily observations as something significant and worth taking note of and being intentional about. So that's been a really great book to read, especially during this time of recovering where I'm limited in what I can do, and just being able to be thankful for what I am able to do. And similar in what I was talking about earlier with the David Holmes documentary that I had watched, it's humbling, or gives good perspective, I think, for how fortunate I am, and to stop at moments, take pause, appreciate the beauty around me, in the nature, in my routine, or in the relationships that I have, or in the fence that I just built with my neighbor. So shout out, Don. But I've been thankful for her for giving me that book. I've been reading it a little bit here and there. And then I have another good friend. Why did I say another? I have a good friend. Oh, I guess I said another because of Austin and Patrick being my co-hosts. So Aaliyah's my sister, but I have a good friend, Nate Urban, who got me a book, or gave me a book to read called Ender's Game or something. That's kind of a sci-fi futuristic novel. Maybe it's even dystopian, definitely futuristic, kind of playing on themes of regimes and war and military, those sort of concepts. The story, the novel's very interesting, though. Obviously it's fictional, but it talks about a young boy going through this academy, training to become a fighter, a soldier, go into the military, and it's very clear that the people running this program have very high hopes and aspirations for him. So that's been fun to read. The story's really drawn me in. I read 80 pages in 2 days a couple days ago. So it definitely, the story gets really good. And if you're looking for a fun, easier fiction read, I'd recommend that. But I'm thankful to Ali and Nate for thinking of me and my recovery and giving me some good books and whatnot to read. So, and if you have any recommendations as a listener, feel free to message me individually if you know me, or to send something to that email address that we kept harping on for the entire first season. You probably know my heart by now, because we used to sign off our episodes with that or what have you. So feel free to interact with us or reach out, and especially if you have ideas or guests you want us to have on too, feel free to reach out with that sort of feedback or advice as well, because it's greatly appreciated. We're just kind of doing this as we go and, trying to figure it out. And while I'm talking about ideas and what have you, I do want to apologize for anyone watching on YouTube today, because I did not want to film myself doing a podcast by myself. I just thought that might be a little sad or what have you. So there's not going to be any video for this one, but enjoy looking at the graphic if you're on YouTube. If you're on Spotify or any other podcast listening service, that this won't really pertain to you. I think I want to hold off about talking about aspirations for the new year or New Year's goals. Maybe we'll do that in a final episode this year. Hopefully I can get Austin and Patrick back on. Or maybe we'll have a guest. Who knows? We're trying new things, and we'll see how they go or whatnot. So anyhow, I hope this podcast finds you well, however it finds you, and that you're having a good Christmas season. Or if you celebrate other holidays, I don't quite know the demographic of our audience, but if you celebrate other holidays, I hope that this is a good time of year for you. I know it can be tricky for some people, and it's been a good December so far. November was pretty rough, truthfully, just personally, and having a lot of things going on. So November's been lighter, but obviously still working through some things on my end personally that I don't need to get into, I guess, right now, or don't really feel the need to get into right now. But regardless, I hope that everyone is doing well out there. It's can be a cruel world and a cruel life at times. We've talked very much on this show about trying to stave off and to stay away from nihilism, and I want to echo that sentiment here now as well. If not for you, then definitely for myself. I'm now rambling and making this a very, very long goodbye, as my family could attest that whenever we're talking on the phone or saying goodbye, we'll start the goodbye, and then we start doing a long, not ramble, but just keep thinking of things to say. So I'm doing that here now as well with myself, talking to myself. So anyhow, I hope that you all do well. If you are having a challenge in life, I hope you can find a good community, because that is an invaluable source of encouragement and incredibly life-giving. Part of the reason that we do this podcast is so that Austin, Patrick, and I can stay in contact and be aware of what's going on in each other's lives. So one of the fundamental drives behind this show is to stay in contact and to connect. So I hope that you're doing the same out there, and I hope you join us next time for a conversation and not just a monologue. Take care, everyone.